In this video, we review the fact that the onset of spring seems to have turned everyone's mind onto sex, with a flurry of news stories from the sex strike to the shocking revelation from Bafta that if you analyse TV output, you'll find more references to sex than to climate change. I know, truly astonishing. My name's Mallen Baker. This is the Mallen Baker Show for Changemakers. So Bafta, the British Academy of Film and Television Arts, says that there needs to be more plot lines and references to climate change to help change people's attitudes towards the planet. Currently, it seems it's failing in that duty, as an analysis of a year's worth of subtitles from 40 TV channels found that references to climate change lagged far behind other terms such as beer and sex. Now, some people would dismiss that as being a ridiculous comment, and actually that would be me. That is a ridiculous comment. Since when was the fact that you talk about something more than sex the measure of how important you found it? We think jobs are important. Do we talk about that more than sex? No. We think that curing cancer is important. Cancer charities are amongst the best supported charities you will find. Do we talk about that more than sex? No. We think that having a nice cup of tea is important. But do we talk about that more than sex? Well, actually, yes. According to the research, there were 60,000 references to tea, but only 56,000 references to sex. But there you go. We are British after all. And that's the fun part. The serious part, though, is that it's a very common response that people think the way to promote a political cause or a social issue is to start hammering home the message in soap operas and every other piece of popular culture you can get your hands on. Now, I think, if you've seen this channel, you'll know, I think climate change is hugely important. I think we need people to support politicians and businesses taking bolder action on the subject. I don't think you achieve that by having characters on Coronation Street or EastEnders having conversations about it.
People who accept science as fact without ever checking it out themselves.
Couldn't agree more, Kenneth.
Plot lines where someone carelessly discards a plastic straw and it ends up killing a whale or whatever else it is you want to do. People go to popular entertainment to be entertained, and that means escapism as much as anything. People who become activists on an issue lose all track of the mindset of people who have not become so fixedly immersed in that issue. They lose sight of the fact that going on about it every single time makes you come across as odd, and that affects your ability to influence people and form connections with them. We've already seen how much people complain, and not unfairly in at least some of the cases, when popular shows decide that they have a mission to promote a woke worldview to an extent that gets in the way of telling a good story. Inserting your politics into such programs doesn't subtly brainwash people into agreeing with you, it provokes reactions that may well be the opposite of what you intended. And in the meantime, we have to wade through some crappy stories where the interesting stuff has been hijacked with the jackboot of social justice. Now, of course, we do want some high quality documentaries about the issues. But the idea that it comes down to quantity, just insert it into as many programs as you can, it's probably the least helpful thing you could do. Plus, the whole principle is based on the same old flawed premise of environmentalism, that the way to address the problem is to encourage people to make tokenistic changes in lifestyle rather than focusing on big system issues. That said, possibly it might have the benefit that people will get so fed up of worthy messages of doom and gloom in their light entertainment that they switch off the TV altogether, which might then lead them into going off and having more sex. Rather bizarrely, that outcome would probably please Jack Ma, China's most famous entrepreneur. The CEO of Alibaba spoke at a mass wedding of employees last week. Recently, Ma had stoked controversy by reiterating his support for exhaustingly long working hours for employees. He calls it his 996 formula, working from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. for 6 days a week. This, in his view, is how Chinese companies become competitive. When he spoke of the wedding, he said the key to happiness was, lots of sex, and he called it his 669 principle, 6 times in 6 days with duration being the key. In China, apparently, the word 9 sounds like the word long. Follow both his work formula and his happiness formula. That will be exactly everything you do, except for a minimal amount of sleeping for the whole of your week bar Sunday, where presumably you're just lying around exhausted. Now, of course, we know very well that the work regime is junk. People that work stupidly long hours become less productive, as well as stressed and unhappy. Fewer hours with happier, more productive employees is hugely better for how companies operate. But even though that's been shown a number of times, you will always find some bosses who just think that squeezing every last drop out of their long-suffering people is the way that they'll succeed. Such bosses shouldn't be allowed to be in charge of anything, because really they're looking to build themselves up on the backs of everyone else. It's the cliche charge against capitalists. And even if it's now the minority of leaders who think like that, the existence of a few inevitably high-profile rogues persuades everyone that it's still the majority. When it comes to Jack Ma's most recent idea, I don't know if anyone's done research on the sex 6 times a week thing, but if you've tried it, do let me know how you got on. One group we know for sure isn't trying it is millennials. It's become well known that the millennial generation, in the West at least, is having less sex than previous generations. For instance, The Economist reported that 23% of Americans aged 18 to 29 reported having had no sex at all for the past 12 months, which is a percentage more than double what it was in the previous decade. Some have suggested that apps like Tinder are to blame, because whereas in the past you would meet people and get to charm them with your interesting personality, with Tinder it's purely about what you look like, and that puts one group in the fast lane and the rest in the swipe left slow lane. But it's also been suggested that the rise of second wave feminism has also been to blame, with so many ways to provoke moral disapproval and outrage, leading to a whole group of men who have always been expected to take the lead in forming relationships traditionally, deciding it's a lot easier to stay at home, play computer games and consume porn. This suggestion, repeated by The Economist article, drew a stinging rebuke from the young megastar of the Democrats, Alexandria Ocasio Cortez, who was furious at the suggestion that millennials were having less sex because of female empowerment. She said, "If you think your celibacy is due to female empowerment, maybe it's because far too many people relied on the disempowerment and silence of women not to be celibate in the first place." And that's a truly awesome response. There's nothing more encouraging to a young man who's presumably feeling worried and conflicted about a valid sexual identity in the modern age than to be told by AOC that basically he's the sort of person who would happily disempower and silence women in order to achieve gratification. No reason at all why that sort of message wouldn't fuel your desire to stay at home and keep well out of the way. Of course, not having sex is seen by some to be the ultimate political statement, as we now know courtesy of Alyssa Milano and her sex strike. In response to the abortion law in Georgia, she said that women should refuse to have sex with their male partners until, quotes, their bodily autonomy is returned. The move was inspired by the Lysistrata play, where women took part in such a strike to stop their men from continuing a war. Now, of course, you'll spot the important difference between the two. In the case of the ancient Greek play, the sex strike was instigated because it was the self-same men who would suffer from the withdrawal of sex who were pursuing the war. In Milano's case, the people who would suffer would be A, the women themselves, because in the modern age we know that women like sex as well. I know it's shocking, but we insist on staying true to the data in this channel. And their partners, who presumably have politically similar viewpoints to them, and therefore wouldn't support the abortion law in any case, and wouldn't have any influence to change it. In the meantime, gleeful conservatives, whose partners obviously do not support a sex strike, pointed out that women being careful not to get pregnant because of the consequences was exactly the sort of responsible behaviour that they would recommend as standard. Meanwhile, a quarter of all millennials shrugged their shoulders because they're not getting any anyway. The point of all of that really is that whatever your position on the Georgia abortion law, when your moral outrage leads you to engage in gestures that have no strategic rationale from a campaigning point of view, you have to ask whether you're actually looking at how to bring about the change you want to see in the world, or whether you're simply posturing for other reasons that may be more to do with how you're seen by others. Finally, if you really do have to talk about sex, For one thing, I think we can safely say is that you shouldn't do it in the form of accusing someone without evidence of being a paedophile. It has been announced that Elon Musk will appear in court on October the 22nd for having, on Twitter, called British diver Vernon Unsworth a pedo. Unsworth, you'll recall, was one of the divers who helped rescue a Thai boys soccer team in a flooding cave, and who provoked Musk's thin-skinned outrage by being disparaging about the entrepreneur's attempts to support the rescue. For those of us that are fans of Musk's disruptive businesses and the kick they've given to innovation for renewable energy, this really isn't a look that we want to see. So there it is. On this beautiful spring day, get out there and enjoy it. Be nice to each other, maybe even be very nice to each other, but hopefully not just because Jack Ma told you to.